Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Talking Behaviour, where I am one of your two hosts, Charlie Fagan, and with me is
James Smith, hello.
and we are here to talk about behaviour by displaying the behaviour of talking. So today is a kind of auspicious episode in that we are talking about one of the two words that's in the name of the title.
Ooh, Otium.
Not that one, James. Behaviour. Behaviour is the topic of today's episode, and it is a good one for us because it's pretty much the core of everything that we do at Otium Behaviour Services. We think about things behaviourally, and we are a behaviourally science-focused setting. James, what do you know about behaviour?
I know very little. I know the basics. I know as much as a normal human knows to try and read behaviour on somebody
Very
else.
presumptuous of you, thinking that you know what a normal human knows.
It's indeed true. I would like to think I know as much as a normal human knows, but nothing behind the science of it.
Okay, well, that's probably useful to me, considering that gives me a lot to talk about. But, well, would you like to potentially give the topic of behaviour a number out of 10 for the beginning, just to, set us off from somewhere?
I'll go with 3.
3.
Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful. Now, I'm going to floor you a little bit this one, because, unfortunately, the other two topics are also about a type of behaviour. So I'm going to ask you, what do you know about these two phrases? First one is respondent behaviour.
No.
0.
We'll go with 0. Yeah.
0, cool. What about operant behaviour?
We'll go with another 0.
Absolutely wonderful. If I were to ask you, what do you think the word respondent means?
Does it mean how people respond to certain triggers?
I'm going to give you a 1 out of 10 instead of a 0, James. That's very, very good. Well done. Congratulations. Leading the witness there on that one, but there we go. Absolutely wonderful. And what about operant?
Operant. Is it the operative, like the best way that they could
Yes.
do certain things?
Yeah, to operate, as in, that's a good one. Yeah, so to do is an operate. That's also, I'm going to give you a 1 out of 10 on that one.
I feel like
potentially
that's
more of a 0.5, but we'll let you have a 1.
I think that's very much more of a pity point from my linguistic knowledge rather than.
Well, that's I feel like that's actually quite fair, considering that most things are named relatively, appropriately, except for the incredibly dangerous viper, as we all know.
Of course.
Thank you, Lemony Snicket, for everything you've given to all of us. So what I'll do is I'm going to make it very easy for you and talk to you straight away about behaviour at the beginning and go, behaviour is anything that we do.
Everything.
Yeah, literally anything that we do. And that is more definitive than you would expect, because there are a lot of things which a body can do that, the body can't do a lot that we do, but we can do everything that a body can do. You kind of get the idea. It requires action, activity. It's something that requires thought or, at the very least, motivation before someone is actually willing to act. Behaviour is how we operate on the environment. It's how we get the things that we want out of it, and it is our it's pretty much the form that we as organisms use to do most of the things that we do. Communication would be considered a form of behaviour. Most behaviourists would say thinking is a type of behaviour as well, right? It's just covert, something that you don't necessarily do in front of other people, and therefore only you are aware of it.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, I was going to say, is behaviour only something that can be seen from somebody else, or is just the thinking, is that the behaviour itself?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? And it originally, if you were going down like a radical behaviourist route, in quotation marks, they would basically say, no, it's not, because it's not something that can be observed and therefore reported upon. It's not a behaviour. But we've kind of developed, or at least my particular sort of arm of the science has developed to believe, yes, actually, covert behaviour is as much behaviour as overt behaviour. It is in fact just as important and just as informative on a lot of different things. So behaviour is one unit of this kind of operating model for how we engage with our environment, right? And the environment itself is the other major thing that you have in it, right? And the environment includes things like other people, objects, the things that you want and the things that you want to get rid of, right? And all of our behaviour, fueled by our motivation, allows us to change our environment and get us what we want from it, or what we have learned to expect from it, especially. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so behavior is anything that you do, and therefore you have to be able to do it. You have to be able to think it. You have to be able to act through it. If a corpse can do it, it's not a behavior. We call this the dead body test.
Would you say it's a behavior even if it doesn't require thought? So if it's an instinct?
Yes. Okay, so that is very, very good, because that leads us into the breakdown of the two other types of behavior that we're going to talk about today, which are more like subcategories rather than being different than behavior in quotation marks, right? So number one, with what we said about behavior already, have you learned anything?
Well, yeah, already.
Yeah,
already.
Yeah.
Put me up a point, man.
Put me up a point. So you're on 4 out of 10.
Yeah, I definitely, obviously, there's such a deep field to cover, but yeah, I think I didn't even think about thought as being a behavior. I would have said, if you'd have asked me before to define a behavior, I would have said it is an action or something that is observable, that has a source, or it's a reaction to a source.
I like that, and those two things are very interesting because they talk about kind of two different reactions, and we're going to go into that a little bit more. The first thing that we're going to talk about is respondent behavior, okay? And this, we're going to talk about it in a very famous story that a lot of people will have heard about. Have you ever heard about Pavlov's dog, James?
I have indeed, yeah.
Right, so just explain to me what the story of Pavlov's dog is from your understanding, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so there was a guy called Pavlov. He was trying to look at behaviours in animals. In particular, it was the dogs that he's most famous for. My understanding of it is that he was trying to enforce a reaction and reinforce it by a stimulus. So by creating something, an action, in this case it was bells or a whistle, I think. He would time that with giving the dogs food. Over time, the dogs came to associate the food with the sound, and eventually it got to the point where he could withdraw the food and still create the sound, and the dogs would still have the same reaction, which was salivation.
Okay, I'm going to give you a couple of points because you actually knew a lot more about respondent behavior than you thought you knew, because you almost actually got almost every single part of that correct, which is really good, even including terminology. So yeah, absolutely. It's about behavior being conditioned, right? And there are multiple forms of conditioning, right? There are ability to take some form of behavior which was occurring in an individual and cause it to occur with a stimulus which never used to evoke it, for example, right? So in this particular situation, you have what's called a unconditioned stimulus, right? Which is something which produces an unconditioned response. These unconditioned stimuli are things which we as organisms need to be able to live inside of our environment. When you smell food, it produces an unconditioned response of salivation because you need food to live, and it's going to remind you to go and actually eat some of it, right? These unconditioned responses do not need to be trained. They are innate. They are the thing which our DNA teaches us to be able to do. These are a form of respondent behavior, right? They respond to something in the environment and they produce this behavioral response which causes you to do things to get you what you need. Another good example to this would be somebody flashing a light in your eye and then your pupils dilating. You have no control over this. It's a reflexive behavior, right? Pavlov's dog basically proved that you could use a conditioning process to take any neutral stimulus that produces no response and condition it to produce the same response as an unconditioned stimulus, right? This produces what's known as a conditioned stimulus, right? Which produces a conditioned response, right? So unconditioned stimulus produces unconditioned response, which means that you can then co-present it with unconditioned stimulus to produce with neutral stimulus to produce conditioned stimulus and conditioned response. This is very good because this allows us to do things like increase the preference of someone, right? If you think about it, when you first began dating someone who you were with, for example, you want to co-present yourself alongside things which they like at a high rate, frequency and intensity, so that they begin to associate you with those things and they become conditioned. They become conditioned to enjoy your presence, and your presence becomes conditioned to produce the response that all the things that you did with that person produced. right? And that's beautiful, right? Because it's how organisms interact, it's how they engage, it's how relationships develop, but it's also how we learn to to associate things which are completely unrelated, right, with things which are completely relevant to our survival, right? So this can also happen in a negative point of view, right? Respondent or reflexive behavior can be conditioned to make you expect a bad outcome.
Right, like cringing away from a fist raised.
Sure, exactly, right. The fist being raised away from you is not technically actually violence, but it is an indication that violence is about to happen based upon your previous experience. And you flinching away from it is a reflexive response because last time that you didn't, you got hit, right? Because a negative outcome came after that not flinching moment, now you have a conditioned negative response, a conditioned motivating operation reflexive, right? You see a worsening set of conditions coming your way and you reflexively respond without having to see the negative outcome, right? Yeah. So respondent behavior, very, very important because it teaches us why we don't like certain teachers. It teaches us why we do love certain activities. And it makes us understand that if you go back far enough into somebody's learning history and learn about the things that went well for them, you will find the things that they enjoy doing because they will have been conditioned through association.
Yeah.
Do you think that you know more about respondent behavior than you did before?
Yeah.
Okay.
Put me up a point. Put me up a point, man.
You were at 3, now you're at 4.
Come on, let's go.
Absolutely beautiful. So technically you started at 0 there thinking 0, but you were actually at, I think, 3, probably. So we've talked about respondent behavior and we've talked a little bit about the word operate, right? I'm going to give you another opportunity to think about what you think operant behavior will be, considering everything that we've talked about to this point.
Oh, operant behaviour. So if we're looking at respondent, it's something that's sort of, the reaction to it.
Response to the environment.
Yeah, so is this one operate? Is it something that is just not at all? Like it doesn't, it happens regardless of the environment.
Oh, gosh, so interesting. Not exactly, no.
Okay.
So reflexive behavior is like you have learning history, which means that you're going to predict certain things going well or badly without having to actually experience them going well or badly, right? Operant behavior operates on the environment, right?
Okay.
It's the behavior that you as an organism use to get what you want out of the environment, and the environment's response measures whether you were successful or unsuccessful.
Okay.
Right? This operant behavior has a more complex unit to it than respondent behavior. Respondent behavior is stimulus, response.
Yeah.
Right? Operant behavior has what we call the ABC response, the antecedent behavior consequence model, right? And this is basically a core unit for how you analyze behavior, and it is really good because it allows you to get what we call like a trial, right? Like a single unit of behavior that you can then assess, including the consequences, which are probably controlling it, and the antecedent circumstances, which probably evoked it, right? The general idea being that operant behavior is behavior which is informed by previous history, and basically when you enter a condition wanting something, you produce behavior that has historically gotten you the thing that you wanted, and then the consequences, you either get it or you don't.
Right, okay.
Right? This then informs that operant model and tells you next time that you get into that situation whether you should do that behavior again. Right? So operant conditioning is basically how we as organisms operate and gain reinforcement from the environment and avoid punishment.
Okay.
Right? Because mostly what we're trying to do is we're trying to gain access to reinforcement, the things that we want or need from an environment, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to avoid those aversive or negative things in the environment which we do not want. Often these things might be intrinsically reinforcing those unconditioned stimuli which produce those unconditioned response. We just don't like them, or we just do. Sometimes they will be conditioned stimuli from long ago that have been associated through that respondent behavior process that we talked about before. What operant behavior does is it basically goes, your environmental conditions signal to you what is available for you to get. If there is a tap inside of a room, water is probably available, right? And therefore you are more likely to stand up, walk over to the tap, get a glass, fill it up, drink the water, and get reinforced by not being thirsty anymore, right? This happens across all the different types of behavior that you have, and mostly what you're trying to do effectively is get something and get away from something. And I say and here, not or, because most things have two parts to them, right?
The positive and the negative.
Yeah, because normally there is a kind of multiple function thing going on with this, right? There is something saying, not only do I not want to be doing this work, but I want to not be bored, right?
Yeah.
And those two things playing together mean I'm playing this video game rather than doing the thing which I should possibly be doing there. There might also be some, mental health stuff going underneath, maybe somebody disassociates or kind of doesn't think about things when they're kind of doing that stuff. But maybe it's just a behavioral cycle, right, which has been reinforced, which is going to happen again when the conditions are exactly the same, right? So that antecedent behavior consequence, that ABC, is the basic unit for operant behavior, and it is how we assess why people are doing what they are doing in a behavior analytical context, right? So we would sit there and go, okay, well, the best way to tell why this behavior is continuing to occur is to watch it, see what happened immediately before it, watch the behavior itself, and see what consequence happened immediately afterwards. We will probably very quickly see what thing consistently happens afterwards that the person is getting. It might be a removal of a negative attention. It might be the addition of something tangible that they wanted. It might be the addition of positive attention that they, were not getting any of 30 seconds before they began to have a crisis. And so all of this, from bottom to the top, you'll see, comes down to motivation. And I think that
what people want.
Yeah, what people want. And that is, it's kind of the stage that happens before that ABC unit, right? Because really what happens with that, I said there's something in the environment, behavior, consequence. Really what actually happens is you see the thing in the environment and you begin to want it, right? Your motivation becomes a key factor, and then you become willing to engage the effort to actually get it. Behavior is hard, it's effortful, it's a lot of things, but most of all, it's extremely effective at getting you what you want.
It can indeed have its profits.
Yeah. So, do you think you know anything more about respondent
behavior? I would say operative behavior. Yeah, I would say so, definitely. But I would also say it's mainly because I think that was the one that I was clueless on.
Yeah, I mean, you were at a 1 and the other 2 you were really at a 3. So yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. I would say probably I have gone up a bit. I definitely would still definitely say I have the most questions.
Yeah,
about
I mean,
this,
please ask more questions because
I just think in terms of explaining it like as an example for
sure.
Like what would you say? So you gave saved for respondent behavior, Pavlov's dog.
Pavlov's dog, yeah, ringing a bell at the same time as presenting food, causing the bell to produce the same response as the food.
Okay, and then for operative behavior, you said the example you gave with the the tap going over to it.
I'll give you a
water.
couple.
Yeah, please do.
Sure. So let's talk about this in terms of the positive and the negative because I think it's really important. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the primary motivator in most situations rather than giving both sides to it like I did at the beginning. I do think that every form of behavior has this synthesized antecedent where you want to get rid of circumstances, but normally there is a primary motivator in most circumstances. So let's say, and that primary motivator is normally the thing that immediately precedes the behavior, right? So if there were 3 or 4 things leading up to the behavior, the one immediately beforehand is the actual trigger and the thing that kicks it off. Everything else just set the event.
Right. Okay.
Right.
So can you almost not ignore those, but you can put them to one side?
Yes, you can say that they made the situation worse, but they didn't trigger the behavior. Right. The thing that triggered the behavior was the one that immediately came before it. Therefore, that was the unmanageable stimulus to the person. It was the thing that they couldn't handle, and it was the thing they reacted to.
See, that's so interesting because that's almost goes against the sort of what I would see as sort of the standard idea of behavior. Quite often, you'll hear the phrase. The straw that broke the camel's back.
Correct.
Is that you'll have all of these other things that have happened. They might be the actual issue, and then all it takes, you've got. For example, let's say got a guy he has a really bad day at work. He comes home. He's had a horrific day. He's got shouted at by his boss. Nothing's gone well. He missed the bus. He missed the train. It took him ages to get home. He gets home, and then he reaches for a glass of water and knocks a glass of water over. And then that is the thing that makes him flip. That is the thing that makes him so angry.
Which goes to show how much received wisdom is totally right about the situation, but completely wrong about how it actually played out. Right? Because the reason that the guy probably didn't react when his boss started shouting at him is because that's a circumstance where him reacting would have a much, much worse outcome.
Yeah, of
right?
course. Yeah.
The whole
So it's
situation is he smashes the glass because him smashing the glass actually will not lead to a negative outcome in that circumstance. He's in a controlled environment. He's able to clean the glass up. He might have to buy another glass, but that's actually going to be far not as bad for him as him screaming in his boss's face during that circumstance. So
Yeah.
the straw that broke the camel's back is correct. The first thing that triggered him after he was able to react triggered him,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And it was enough to cause him to go over the edge and then break the glass.
That is
Yeah.
there a name for those behaviours that or the stimulus that
The one
don't have the
preceding,
effect? Yeah.
we call them setting events.
Setting event.
Yeah, they set the stage of this situation, right?
Yeah.
They make you far more likely to react, but they still aren't the thing that makes you react. You might be late for work because you had a long, drive, there was traffic, somebody cut you up, the lights were red every single time, and all of these things will be building you up bit by bit by bit by bit, right? But then that one guy who really pisses you off, who's your junior, who's in front of you, and that one moment where he really shouldn't be, is the one who's going to get screamed in his face because he's not going to do anything about it.
Yeah.
Right? And that's sad as much as it is anything else, because
yeah.
people don't realise that these things that they're screaming at people for are not to do with the things they're screaming people for. They're screaming at people because they have control in that circumstance and they don't have control in others. Yeah. So I'll give you some examples. Let's talk about this from different ones. So you are at home and you are sitting and waiting for your elderly mother to cook you food, but she is fussing about with other stuff and going around and doing things. Because of the fact that she's delaying and delaying and delaying, this builds up your motivation to get through this situation, and you kind of like make snippy remarks or comments, and this causes them to kind of stop what they're doing, actually go away and cook the meal that they were distracting themselves from.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this has reinforced the behaviour of being snippy towards them, and means that next time you are in this circumstance, you are going to be more likely to be snippy again in the future.
Yeah.
Right? That's a wait behaviour, right? You wanted to make the person stop delaying you, and so you did something which caused them to speed up the circumstance, right? Second situation, this is more of a positive behavior for a negative thing. You go to a coffee shop, and there is this very pretty girl that you've been going and you've been very trying to flirt with as much as you possibly can, but you're not that great at flirting. So
How dare you?
I may be talking personally here, who knows? And you eventually get your things together and try and ask them out, and they say no because you are an awkward person and all of this stuff, and it goes round and round and round. But you really, really want that person to go out with you, so you don't do this, people. Just don't. I don't know. You're persistent. You try and be nice and friendly. You're not pushy. Don't be pushy. This is the point.
Yeah.
You communicate. Right, and you spend lots of time. Your persistence means that person gets more time to know you, and because of this, they actually do end up going out with you, and then 6 months later they dump you. However, next time you will still be more persistent when someone says no, because that was successful at getting you that day and the situation. Right, that told no was ineffective to persistence, and so persistence gets reinforced. Yeah, if the person continued to say no,
then it wouldn't be.
You
would
be
be taught to leave it.
Mm-hmm. And you would basically think, well, that didn't work. I need to approach this differently from the beginning. Maybe not ask until I'm sure that I know that the person likes me.
Yeah.
Right. That's a couple of different circumstances. Let's talk about something avoidant instead. I suppose waiting's avoidant, to be fair. Avoidance of waiting is avoidant.
Yeah.
You are in a meeting and your boss calls on you to answer a question about something which is important to the situation, and so you give the shortest possible answer that you can get away with because you find it very uncomfortable having to talk in front of people. And what this does is it encourages your boss to not call upon you in the future. Yeah, all of these antecedent, someone's asked you to do something, behavior, I do something to avoid having to do that in future, consequence, either it happens again and then I don't do that, or reinforcement, I don't have to deal with it anymore.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
No worries. Any other questions?
Would you say that those behaviours,
Mm-hmm.
and this is, I don't know, this is, I guess, going a bit more into potentially sort of research style, are those behaviours things that you have to experience to reinforce, or can they be sort of taught into you, or is that what parenting is?
So that's a very, very, very good question. And it is possible to teach something without having to encounter the consequence of it, but you have to be able to comprehend, for example, the outcome,
Yeah.
or you have to have a very complicated teaching system which is able to emulate that process. And there are teaching procedures that do this. So if you were talking about a typically developing person, a lot of them find it quite easy to imagine what it's like to be hit by a car without actually being hit by a car, right?
Yeah.
That's a very good, clear example of, you can be told if this hits you, you're going to die, and you don't need to encounter that once. That's a bad enough outcome that you can comprehend, and you're not going to go anywhere near it. If you get even close to it, right, a car comes close enough that you actually get freaked out, that's enough to reinforce it for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Right? If you didn't have the cognitive capacity to comprehend that outcome, that might not be enough. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that can be a challenge when teaching people with severe learning disabilities, is often they do not believe the consequence until the consequences happen to them, even if you are teaching them every level down, because you are often sort of superhero like at keeping these people away from risk, and because of that they don't encounter that.
So
Yeah.
how do you find that on a daily basis of working with people? Because I presume that's part of what you do when you're talking with them and when you're dealing with them, with your clients on a daily basis. Is how do you find trying to reinforce that without having them exposed to these risks?
So number one, I am obviously a control freak when it comes down to risk management, right? My risk assessments are incredibly detailed, right? Like, I have control measures that I put in specifically to reduce the chance of anything like that happening. But the secondary thing is, you have to teach people in the natural environment. You have to actually like treat it as real, and people will get the social element to it, right? So a good example is when you're growing up as a kid, seeing how your parents react to things, like it's programmed into you to like fully respond to that and like believe it, right? And if you are in a circumstance like a behavior analytical setting where people are very non-reactive, right, most of the time, and then you do something which gets a reaction out of them and gets them to very clearly state to you that you need to never do that again, because it's very, the contrast in those circumstances can be enough, right, to reinforce it.
Yeah.
I'm a gentle person, right? Always I'm just trying to educate people and inform them about the risks of the choices that they're making, and control the choices which they are not able to comprehend or do not have capacity to make the decisions from. My whole thing is, if you can't expose somebody to a risk, you just need to plan for it, right? You need to fund it. You need to make sure that you don't allow for an opportunity, unfortunately. On the other side of it, if I'm trying to teach somebody to do something where they're not going to encounter the consequence of it, I find that if you have an effective reinforcement system, right, if people are willing to work with you in the person's network and are willing to utilize the person's interests effectively, right, you can concurrently take data with an individual, right? If you're trying to teach them to self-monitor, for example, which is an evidence-based procedure, right? You set out the data that you want them to be able to take, right? And then you take it with them concurrently, and you basically reinforce them depending upon it being the same, right? And if there is variance, especially in their favor, right, that doesn't lead to reinforcement, and you keep going until the person is accurately reporting on themselves, and then you try and systematically fade out the salient elements of that check. Right, what was visible about it. You try and get it to the point where they are doing everything that they were doing with the check without the check being visible, but the check is still there, right? And then you try and remove the check. But you have to be systematic about it.
Of course, yeah.
Again, that's going to be a catchphrase on this one, I think. Does that help?
Yes, it does, yeah.
Amazing. So you had 1 out of 10 on this one. What are we on now?
I think that's gone up a little bit more. I'm gonna go up to a 3.
Ooh, baby, that's pretty good. We love to see it. Well, that's actually pretty darn good. So, all right, we need to do the data component of this because this is obviously my
Of
favourite
course,
part
yeah.
of the day, and if we don't do it, I get very angry. And you know,
Numbers are my friends.
numbers are my only friends. No, James is also my friend. I have two friends, Numbers and James.
But which is better?
Which of them is better? Definitely Numbers.
Definitely.
Definitely. No, I'm joking. Not just rizzing James for the YouTube shorts. All right.
Not another one.
Not another one. All right. So you started at 3 for the behaviour topic, which meant you had 7 to gain. You started at 3 for the respondent behaviour topic, which meant you had 7 to gain. You started at 1 for operant behaviour.
I was a big dumb guy.
And you had 9 to gain on that one. You then gained 1, 1, and 2, which is not bad. And that was a total of 23 potential gains. So that is 4 over 23, which I think is the same we got last time. No, we got 3.2 last time. So this is better.
Interesting.
4 over 23, please. Shams?
4 over 23.
What is the percentile increase, please? Times 100, of course.
4 divided by 23 minus 100 equals 17.4.
That's lovely.
Is that about right?
I'm thinking so. I'm just going to double check that I did do this all correctly, but I'm pretty sure. So that was that. Yeah, that's that. And then we've gained 4 over 23. And you said 17.39%. 17.39%. I think that might be less than we got on the last one.
Did we do...
It might be because we had less point, more
points to gain.
No, more points to gain will be what it is.
Yeah.
It'll be more points to gain.
So, of the possibility of my learning, well, that's never going to really happen, is it, realistically? Because if I'm stupid on a subject, the chances of me going from a 1 to a 10 are incredibly
We're
low.
not looking for, like, jumps of 1 to 9. Let's put it this way, because, like, that would be insane, ridiculous, and I'd have to spend an hour talking about a single topic, and you'd absolutely hate me afterwards.
Yeah.
But it's a point of comparison. It's not actually about like the ultimate or the legitimate potential amount. It's about the improvement or the average staying and maintaining, right? And the fact that we're already increasing at above 10% each time makes me happy because that means we're gaining above 3% generally. 3 marks generally. And that makes me happy.
Yeah, I think if I can just consistently feel like I am learning on these,
and then eventually,
I'm happy.
Yeah, well, you're allowed to be happy.
You know what that means?
Only when you continue learning.
That means I am positively reinforcing me continuously turning up and doing these podcasts.
You are definitely doing that, and you're making it more likely that I will do the same in the future. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Night.